Hey, you boys want to do another Mass Effect tier list?
Hell yeah, Barack. Let's see what you cooked up.
All right, here's a tier list of all the talents and powers across the Mass Effect games.
Some of these powers are repeated across the games.
We'll judge the repeat powers as they perform in the games they're in, so expect repeated biotics like pull to be different game to game.
Makes sense. Start us off, Barack.
All right, first talents are the weapons talents you unlock under each type of gun.
Carnage is my goat.
Marksman clears.
Marksman is useless. Oh, you can shoot without overheating for 6 seconds. So cool. Meanwhile, I'm over here shooting a big blast of energy that does area of effect damage, and it gives shotguns a long-range option.
With marksman pistols can fit any need in the game. They're good at long, medium, and close ranges.
It's not about effectiveness, it's about blowing the opponent's back out with a massive blast of raw energy.
You're still talking about guns, right, Donald?
Of course, what else would it be?
Among all the weapon talents, I gotta say Carnage and Assassination are the most satisfying to use. While Overkill and Marksman feel a bit redundant, they do essentially the exact same thing, just for different weapons.
The accuracy bonus Marksman gives pistols gets it clear of Overkill.
Don't need that extra accuracy if you just learn how to aim, Joe. We've seen you in President's Plays videos.
All right, to be honest, the gun powers are all pretty basic. They're useful early on in the game, but as you get better guns and modifications, you'll probably end up using them less and less. So why don't we put them all in C tier?
I always use Carnage. It's the coolest of the bunch. It should go in S tier.
If Carnage goes in S tier, then Marksman should go up there too.
I'm putting all 4 of them in C tier. We're not going to argue about this when there's way better powers in the games.
So much for democracy. These tier lists always boil down to you running everything, Barack.
Please, I always accommodate the 2 of you with your trash takes. Now we'll move on to the combat talents, beginning with Adrenaline Burst. This is a signature ability for the Soldier and Vanguard classes.
Adrenaline Burst is a crucial ass power. There are plenty of firefights where you may pop all your cooldowns and need to bring your immunity or barrier back up, making you doubly tanky in prolonged combat.
Adrenaline Burst counters the effects of damping, which puts all your tech and biotics on cooldown. A great power when the enemy gets the drop on you.
Adrenaline Rush is going into A tier. It's a great power, but it does fall off later on as your cooldowns get shorter as you level them up. Now we have the immunity power, which you unlock under the fitness talent.
There's nothing I love more than popping immunity and just walking straight through rockets or tanking hits from a Krogan head on.
Unfortunately, immunity went through a bit of a nerf going from Mass Effect 1 to the Legendary Edition. It used to have a much longer duration, maxing out at 20 seconds with a shorter recharge time at 30 seconds. Now it has a flat 6-second duration and 45-second recharge, making it only usable in emergencies.
Put it in C tier, the ability is too situational.
Damn you, BioWare, did you really have to nerf immunity? You didn't even touch barrier.
To be fair, barrier doesn't make you nearly immortal. Physical damage can still cook you. Immunity makes you, well, immune.
Sucks to suck, Donald. Biotics are just better.
Now we have Shield Boost, a power you can get in every class through your armor talents, all aside from Sentinel.
A basic power, but a clutch one all the same. Shield Boost will recharge your shields by a percentage amount over 2 seconds. It's not instant like barrier, but fast enough to save you when things get tight.
Anything that prolongs my time in a firefight gets a pass from me.
There's not really anything wrong with Shield Boost. You can always pop it if something surprises you, and it becomes more useful as your shields get stronger over the course of the game. Definitely a B tier power. Last combat power is Unity.
I never need it. I always clear firefights fast enough.
Well, I need it, and it's goated. Unity revives all fallen squad mates when they go down. It's got to be the most important talent in the game.
Joe, until recently you only played Mass Effect on normal difficulty. What the hell are you doing letting your squad die?
Shut up, Donald. What happens when I play Mass Effect is none of your business.
Nobody is perfect, and sometimes things are going to go bad when you're playing the game. And Unity is a super necessary power to keep yourself from suffering a game over. It has a long cooldown, but for good reason. Gotta put it in S tier.
Tech powers are next.
Sleeper powers. Tech is boring and doesn't do anything.
You're actually bugging, Donald. The tech powers are nearly as useful as biotics. The first one is AI hacking, which causes enemy synthetics to fight for you.
Okay, AI hacking kind of sucks because it only works if the enemy synthetic you hack is near another foe. If it sees you first or is closer to you, it'll just run you down instead.
You can't even hack the fun bots like Geth Primes and Colossi.
Honestly, AI hacking isn't all that in Mass Effect 1, and you'd be better off using any other tech power. It has a very niche usage, but overall I think it goes in D tier.
Neural Shock is next, and it's a peak power.
Got a Krogan running at you. Just hit Neural Shock and they'll drop to the ground for a quick second, and you'll do a little toxic damage as well.
The power is good. 5 seconds at its max rank. Plenty of time to reduce any organic opponent to dust.
Neural Shock is a great power for disabling foes. We'll put it in A tier. Next up is Overload. which definitely has to be a S-tier power.
Overload is the only tech power that's worth a damn in my books. It gives you an immediate edge in combat by clapping enemy shields and reducing damage protection.
It hits over a wide radius too, so you can really clear a lot of enemies immediately at the start of battle.
Yep, no arguments here. It goes in S-tier.
Next up is damping.
Damping is a powerful defensive tech ability. It does a bit of damage at a wide radius. Stuns foes for 3 seconds, and on top of that, it'll put enemy biotic and tech talents on cooldown.
It's annoying as hell when the enemy does it to you, but great that you can do it back to them.
I usually just shoot the enemy dead before they can get their powers off.
As a tech talent, the stun effect damping brings is most effective on Geth, but less so on organic enemies like the Thorian creepers.
Most of the enemies in the main missions of the game are Geth anyway. Put damping in A tier.
The last tech power is Sabotage, a great power that can save the day if you're feeling pressed.
S tier power, you can stop enemies from shooting by overheating their weapons.
Hey, it doesn't work on organic-based attacks like the Thorian creeper vomit or bug spit.
Most enemies in the games use guns anyway, so that hardly matters.
Gotta put Sabotage in S tier. Anywhere from 15 to 25 seconds of the enemies not shooting is crazy.
It's not that good, Joe. Most enemies will just swap guns and keep shooting you.
Sabotage is great, it has its uses, but at best it only buys you a few seconds rather than the entirety of the duration. We'll put it in A tier, and now we move on to the biotic abilities.
I mean, what's there to judge here? Biotics in Mass Effect 1 are insane across the board.
Barrier is insane. You strengthen your shields for up to 23 seconds, which accounts for half the cooldown time. You can pop this whenever you want and just tank most damage.
Just be wary, Barrier won't protect you against physical attacks or explosive ordnance.
Considering most opponents won't be getting close to you in the first place if you're a biotic, that's hardly a problem. Even a squishy class like the Adept has insane survivability with Barrier. It's got to be a S tier power.
Lift, Singularity, Stasis, and Throw all have to go in S tier as well then.
Crowd control biotics are crazy in Mass Effect 1. All 4 of these abilities have long durations and good range.
There's nothing I love more than going into a room and just dropping Singularity down and watching every enemy in the room float all over the place helplessly. Then there's also Stasis, which just lets you basically remove an enemy from the game. And with the Bastion specialization, you can damage them.
Throw is good at stopping any charging foe like a Krogan or Geth Prime from running up on you. It just stops them dead in their tracks.
Same thing with Lift. Biotic classes in Mass Effect 1 are easy mode, like using mage builds in Elden Ring.
Intelligence is harder than strength, Donald.
You say as you just spam Azure Comet over and over.
What's that? I can't hear you over just spamming the jump attack or Lion's Claw on repeat.
Wrong game, fellas, focus. The crowd control biotics all go in S tier, and that leaves us with Warp. The least flashy of the biotics, but still a good one.
Warp does damage over time, which counters Krogan regeneration.
The real big thing is lowering damage protection anywhere from 50% to 75%, giving you an easier time.
Just like with the other biotics, it's got to go into S tier. It's always applicable in combat. Now we're moving on to the powers in Mass Effect 2.
First off is the soldier's signature power, Adrenaline Rush, which gives you a sick bullet time and boosts your damage.
At its maxed rank, you'll also take 50% less damage to your health.
Adrenaline Rush is kind of strange. It has some uses, such as not interrupting Shepard when they're sprinting. Its damage boost is multiplicative, but it doesn't boost ammo powers. On top of that, the rate of fire of your guns doesn't change to match the time dilation. So you could potentially end up doing less damage depending on your weapon.
Not gonna lie, it seems kind of mid.
Adrenaline Rush is good as hell when you're using the Matic, but it's situational in most other cases. I'm just gonna put it in B tier.
What? Who cares if it's situational? It's goated when you use the right gun.
Donald, a power being useful in a handful of situations is not good enough for it to be ranked high. Next is Concussive Shot, another soldier power.
It's all right, it's good CC and damage.
Concussive Shot does 350% damage against barriers, which lets you just floor collectors, including Harbinger. On top of that, downed enemies take double damage. So if you're fighting someone unprotected, you can knock them and they'll just explode.
Concussive Shot also has uses on protected foes, stunning them for a brief moment to buy you a small window of time. Plus, you'll one-shot unprotected husks and abominations. We'll put Concussive Shot in B tier. The main 3 ammo types are next: Cryo, Disruptor, and Incendiary ammo.
The best ammo type is cryo ammo. It's satisfying freezing opponents and then watching them shatter into a million pieces.
Of course, you think Cryo is the best because you play on lower difficulties when enemies are unprotected. Cryo is mid at best. The freezing effect only works on enemies with no extra layers of defense.
Frozen foes also take extra damage. That's enough to boost it right there.
I don't know about that, Joe. Cryo ammo is too situational. Incendiary ammo is vital for cutting through armor, and disruptor ammo is the most applicable in combat since shields are the most common health type, followed by armor and then barriers.
Easy solution, put disruptor ammo in A tier. Not only does it cut through shields, it paralyzes synthetic opponents and does bonus damage to their regular health. On top of that, at rank 3, disruptor ammo will cause standard firearms to overheat, causing them to not fire.
Incendiary ammo goes into B tier. It cuts through armor, does damage over time, and causes unprotected organic enemies to stop approaching as they panic from the fire. Cryo ammo has its uses, but it's decidedly the worst of the bunch, so we'll put it in C tier.
This is BS. You're basing this too heavily on insanity difficulty.
I haven't played anything but insanity in years, Joe. I can't judge things off normal.
Normal is generous. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays on casual.
Well, excuse me, I prefer to enjoy the story instead of dying over and over.
Next up are the tech powers. Let's see if AI hacking is any better in Mass Effect 2.
It's definitely better. Hacked enemies will always attack foes and immediately draw their attention away from Shepard and their allies. However, you still need to strip synthetics of their shields or armor first.
The hacked synthetic will also be given some shields to keep them in the fight longer, and they'll lose them once the duration ends.
It's a good power. Area hacking is particularly good if you catch a couple or more synthetics in its radius. You'll completely turn a fight.
It's still only useful on bots, and most of the time, your hacked target will just be gunned down by all the nearby enemies next to it.
Gonna put it in C tier, decent power with some uses, but there are definitely better ones that are worth your cooldown.
Speaking of which, now we have Overload.
Overload is the GOAT, a vital power for clearing all the shields in this game.
Not only is Overload effective against the most common health type, it causes enemy weapons to overheat for up to 6 seconds, and it absolutely poops on synthetics.
And there's nothing funnier than causing those annoying ass flamethrower Vorcha to explode when you hit them with Overload.
Power has to go into A tier. It's necessary to have an effective time in Mass Effect 2.
It's telling that 2 of the best squad mates in Mass Effect 2 in terms of gameplay are Miranda and Kasumi, both of which have Overload by default.
Cryoblast is next, and I won't let you guys put it in D tier.
Useless power and status effect, can't get through any of the protective health types, and by the time you can use it, you're better off just killing the opponent.
I will give Cryoblast B tier at least because unlike Cryo Ammo, it can freeze multiple unprotected targets.
All right, well, I'm just gonna say it's S tier on the actual fun game difficulties.
Whatever helps you sleep at night, Joe. Next on the list is Incinerate.
Gotta love frying up some Vorcha and Krogan for dinner.
Even I won't argue. Incinerate is a great power. Damage over time is crazy.
It's worth pointing out that Incinerate does not do damage over time to the protective health types, only to regular health.
Incinerate also causes flamethrower opponents to explode, and it makes other organics to panic.
Incinerate is as good Overload because not only does it clear armor, it can damage health too. Overload, on the other hand, never damages organics. We're putting Incinerate in S tier. Now we have the combat drone.
Tali's drone is called Chatika, and she's a sweetheart.
Tali might not approve, but her pet is D tier. It's useless. It barely does any damage.
Well, that's not entirely fair, Donald. The combat drone serves as a good distraction, same as the AI hacking. An attack drone does decently, so does the explosive evolution.
Dropping a combat drone to distract Harbinger is clutch. It's funny as hell teaming up with Tali and Legion and dropping 3 combat drones on the field.
The drone has a lot of niche uses. It's not super powerful though, so we'll put it in C tier. Now we're moving on to a real GOAT power, Tactical Cloak.
This power is a lifesaver. Unlike Mass Effect 1, you don't get experience from fighting enemies, so there isn't really any reason to fight anything. So you can just pop the cloak and run straight to the next checkpoint.
Of course, you'd use it to run from your responsibilities, Sleepy Joe. The real usage of the cloak is to get into the right position so you can unload tons of damage on an opponent.
Both things you two described are excellent uses of the cloak. When it's activated, enemies immediately lose track of Shepard and will target the squad instead. This can allow you to get yourself out of trouble. The cloak can also be activated when you're sprinting.
It's got to go in S tier.
We're in agreement.
Good. We'll round out the tech powers with tech armor, the signature power of Sentinels. With how uncommonly played the Sentinel class is, I'm sure people are unfamiliar with how insane this power is.
People always call Soldier the tank class, but nah, Sentinel clears. Tech armor gives you additional shield strength on top of your base shields, letting you double the strength.
The bonus to your shields lasts so long as you have even a sliver of them left, and tech armor will regenerate to their full strength.
On top of that, if your tech armor does break, it'll let loose an energy pulse that will stagger or knock enemies down. It also instantly kills unarmored husks.
Need that tech armor for the Reaper IFF mission.
Tech armor is going into S tier, and now we move on to biotics.
Poor biotics, they're but a mere shell of what they used to be.
All biotics besides warp are now countered by shields, armor, and barriers, but they still have uses.
On lower difficulties, biotics are still insanely good at providing crowd control, though.
Starting off with the biotic charge, just stick it in S tier for being cool as shit.
Charge is definitely crazy to use. You fly in and collide with your opponents, giving you a free refresh on your biotic barrier health. And you get a time dilation effect when you come out of it, allowing you to line up a free shot.
Okay, charge is cool and all, but the knockback isn't worth a damn if the enemies have health protections.
So what? The enemies won't have health protections when I fly in and hit them with a point-blank shot?
You guys underranked cryo ammo and cryo blast because of armor and shields. They make charge less effective too.
Nah, Joe, that's not the same thing. You might not knock armored or shielded foes back with charge, but once you fly in, you're pretty much in the perfect position to just obliterate them anyway.
Okay, and then you're stuck out in the open to get shot at.
Not a problem. For one, at rank 2, your shields will also be strengthened when they're restored, and as long as you're not a dumbass, you should be able to get back into cover.
The only bad thing about charge is that Mass Effect 2 loves to put enemies on inaccessible ledges so you can't charge them. Also, charging sometimes just flat doesn't work because of some obstacle that no one can see. With that in mind, charge is going into A tier.
Have you lost your damn mind? I said S tier.
I know what you said, Donald. It's A tier. The rule of cool isn't enough. The power does have serious limitations that keep it from being all powerful.
Bullshit.
Are Vanguard players always so horny for charging into stuff?
Yes, it's what we live for.
Charge this, charge that. Why don't you charge into the club and get some bitches on your dick? We're moving on to the crowd control biotics.
Like we said before, these have all been seriously nerfed since Mass Effect 1.
Obviously, on unprotected enemies, they provide great crowd control. Shockwave and Singularity are especially good on crowds of husks.
And throw can knock enemies off ledges while pull leaves enemies helpless in midair.
It should also be noted that pull will prime enemies for a biotic detonation using warp.
Shockwave is probably the worst of the bunch. It only goes in a straight line and only momentarily staggers protected enemies D tier.
Singularity, on the other hand, is a lot better. Even if it can't lift protected foes, it'll still have them stun-locked for its entire duration. This is clutch if you're trying to stop Harbinger from pulling up on you.
Enemies stuck inside the vortex will also take some damage over time as well.
Singularity is B tier. It has a great use case even when faced with shields, armor, and barriers. Plus, it primes enemies for biotic detonation.
Pull is next. I'd say it goes in D tier.
Nah, it can go in C. It might only momentarily stun things like Shockwave, but at least it can be used in combos with Warp.
Throw goes in C as well. Knocking off unprotected enemies is clutch.
And that leaves us with Warp.
This shouldn't be a surprise. Warp is S tier.
Warp is arguably the most important power across the entire game. Not only is it used for detonating biotics, it can target 2 of the health types in the game, armor and barriers. This makes Warp vital when you're fighting the Collector forces and Harbinger.
It also permanently stops the health generation of Krogan and Vorcha if their health bar is hit directly.
On top of that, it has a knockback or staggering effect on most protected enemies. Warp goes into S tier. Unity is in Mass Effect 2 as well, but it does essentially the same thing, just revive your squad mates.
Now we have the bonus powers you can pick up from your squad mates once you get their loyalty. First is Kasumi's Flashbang Grenade.
That shit broken as hell, S tier by default.
First of all, Flashbang Grenade overheats weapons, then it can stagger or knock down most foes. Next is the crazy part. It disables enemy biotic and tech powers, even if the victim still has armor or other protection, keeping them from using their powers.
Leave it to my girl Kasumi to give us one of the best powers in the game. The ability suppression effect lasts upwards of 40 seconds. It even works on that annoying bastard Harbinger so he can't throw his stupid warp blast out.
Yeah, Flashbang is going in S tier. This thing is actually nuts. Next is Grunt's Fortification power.
Sadly, our son's power just isn't worth using.
Fortification is very similar to Barrier and Geth's Shield Boost, except it's lacking in specific areas that just make it inferior across the board. For one, because it's a combat power, it doesn't receive any enhancements from biotic or tech upgrades. It has no known unique properties, and since you can get Barrier from Jacob early on, there's absolutely no reason to use Fortification.
How nice of Jacob to have the better power so he can forget to use it when it counts.
I wish Grunt would forget to use Fortification, because in OG Mass Effect, 2 Grunt would get stuck reactivating the power once he got it.
Looks like Fortification is our first F tier. There isn't any real use case for it. The other similar powers do its job better. Now we've got Zaid's Inferno Grenade.
As you might expect, it does great damage against armor. Of course, you have to actually pop out of cover to throw it, so you'll potentially be lit up. Plus, it can be hard to land on foes behind cover.
Gotta work on that throwing arm, Joe.
Thankfully, Inferno Grenade detonates on contact, and it has a decent splash radius so you can catch targets in the fire.
On the flip side, Inferno Grenade can deal friendly fire to Shepard and the team.
It's a decent power, good on armor, but inferior to Incinerate since that actually seeks targets. We'll put the grenade in C tier.
Garrus's armor-piercing ammo is next.
Armor-piercing ammo is pretty good. It provides the highest raw damage bonus against armor, and the second highest against regular health.
I'd put it above incendiary ammo for that reason alone, A tier.
Agreed. The next bonus ammo power is Thane's Shredder ammo, which gives us the highest bonus damage of all ammo powers, but only on organics, and their protections must be stripped away first.
It's incredibly good on lower difficulties, but lacks the necessary versatility to succeed on the higher ones. Shredder ammo should go into B tier.
And the last ammo bonus power here is Warp ammo.
Warp ammo combos great with biotics. It'll do double damage to enemies that are ragdolling and stuff like Singularity or Pull. It also does bonus damage to barriers.
Barriers are the least prominent health type, but every enemy that has it is usually some kind of boss or harbinger. So it's great if you put warp ammo on a sniper and just annihilate them.
It'll go in B tier with Shredder ammo. Great usage, but still a bit limited.
Now we're on to a real goat power. It's Tali's Energy Drain.
Energy Drain is another one of those powers with a strong case for best in the game. It's useful for any class.
Energy Drain does double damage to shields and can cut through barriers as well. It provides the largest shield restoration and refills them faster than just waiting for the normal recharge, allowing you to peek in and out of cover more often.
Straight into S tier. If you ever find yourself wondering what bonus power you should pick up, just get Energy Drain. Now we have the bot's Geth Shield boost.
It does roughly the same thing as Barrier and Fortification, but with its improved evolution, it'll provide bonus weapon damage.
It's better than Fortification since it actually benefits from tech upgrades, but is still far off from tech armor. So we'll put Geth Shield boost in C tier. The last tech power is Morden's Neural Shock.
It's ass. It only works on unprotected foes, and it does no damage to regular health like it did in Mass Effect 1. On top of that, the stun duration can be interrupted early if you shoot an opponent before they fall over.
Just want to point out the Neural Shock does do a tiny bit of damage to protections.
It does still have uses. It'll stop the regeneration of foes, and it kills husks.
Okay, at this point, what doesn't kill husks when they don't have armor? I'm pretty sure you could breathe and one would fall over.
Honestly, it's a D tier power. In terms of crowd control, you have a better option among the bonus powers.
Jacob's Barrier is next.
More like our barrier. Taylor canonically does not ever use it. Not in Mass Effect 3 when he gets shot, and not in the comic books either.
The one unique thing about Barrier is that it has no activation animation, which means you can pop it and not be interrupted midway. It can come clutch when you're being lit on fire or something.
That does actually make it a lot better than Geth Shield boost.
Agreed, Barrier goes into B tier.
Morant's Dominate is next.
It's essentially an organic version of AI hacking.
There's one thing that makes Dominate worse, and it's the fact that it has to stun targets for a few seconds first, which counts as part of the duration.
I agree with you there, Don. AI hacking is instant, while Dominate isn't. So we'll put Dominate in D tier and move on to Samara's Reeve, a power that is effective on barriers and armor.
Reeve is something special. First, it disables enemies and holds them in place. This counts as being ragdolled, so they take double damage. It also cancels out health regeneration.
The real power of Reeve comes from its life drain. If it's used on regular health, Reeve provides an increase to your maximum health and slowly restores it over time.
Reeve is right up there with Warp S tier. Next up is Miranda's Slam, and I gotta admit, I wish Miranda would slam me from time to time.
Barry?
You getting kind of brave, Barack? Isn't Michelle around?
Please, you think Michelle watches our stuff? Never mind that, get back to the powers.
Slam is fast and comes out near instantly since it has no projectile. On lower difficulties, you can use it to just end a group of husks.
It's still no different from the other biotics. Protected enemies can resist it, and does Slam even stagger enemies?
Not as much as Singularity would.
D tier power.
The last power of Mass Effect 2 is Liara's Stasis. Unlike other biotics, Stasis is effective on any defensive layer of health. Though it's worth noting, Stasis won't do anything to Harbinger or other major enemies like Praetorians and the Thresher Maw.
When an enemy comes out of stasis, they'll immediately fall to the ground, where they're vulnerable to taking more damage.
Still, unlike in Mass Effect 1, you can't damage opponents stuck in stasis, and if you use it too much on one opponent, they'll gain resistance.
Stasis is niche. It has its uses. For one thing, it can work on the Human Reaper larva during the suicide mission. There are better bonus powers, though, so we'll put it in C tier. Next, we have Mass Effect 3's powers. We're going to see a lot of repeats here, but the rankings will change a bit. First, we have Adrenaline Rush and Concussive Shot.
Adrenaline Rush gets some new tech in Mass Effect 3. When you pop it, you'll instantly reload your gun, letting you dish out more damage per second.
You can also use Rush to cancel the venting animation of the Particle Rifle and M7 Lancer, so it begins recharging right away.
At rank 6, you can choose to either increase shield strength or use an offensive power while Adrenaline Rush is active, granting you a little bit of flexibility with setting up explosive combos.
Adrenaline Rush is a better power in 3, so we'll sit it in A tier.
How's Concussive Shot in 3?
Just as good, if not better. You can turn the Concussive Shot into a shredder round, which lets it just annihilate organic opponents.
My favorite is the Amplification Evolution, which lets the shot take on the properties for your active ammo power, which lets it both prime or detonate combos. You'll do 400% damage to armor or shields if you're using incendiary or disruptor ammo respectively on.
Concussive Shot may not be the flashiest power, but it's very applicable.
Put Concussive Shot in A tier. It's a step up from the Mass Effect 2 version.
Ammo powers are next. All 3 of them are useful for setting up explosive combos.
Disruptor ammo got improved. Now it's also effective on biotic barriers, granting it more versatility. Plus, all unprotected enemies get stunned by the electrocution.
Disruptor ammo lost the overheating guns mechanic, though.
Doesn't need it.
Disruptor ammo improved from 2 and it's going into S tier.
Cryo ammo got some improvements too. Instead of doing nothing to protected enemies, it'll give the chilled status effect, which slows their movement, and it provides armor reduction.
I guess your little freeze bullets got better, Joe.
Cryo ammo in Mass Effect 3 goes above the Mass Effect 2 version, so it'll go in B tier, leaving us with Incendiary.
The maxed out version of incendiary ammo has a 50% chance to let loose an explosive burst on each shot. This applies to each individual shotgun pellet, too.
Incendiary ammo is best used for rapid-fire weapons. It can turn the Geth Pulse rifle from a pea shooter into a pretty decent weapon.
This got my pyro side heating up. Put it in A tier.
All right, on to some newer powers. We have the 4 different grenades.
Frag out.
Grenade powers don't have cooldowns, but do have a limited amount. They all also stagger light enemies caught in the blast zone, assuming they aren't killed outright.
I hate the grenade. It's BS that Cerberus operatives and cannibals can perfectly land theirs right where they need them to, and I gotta watch mine go way off target.
Bro has no aim and no game.
Frag grenade differs from the other 3 in that it can't prime any combos, but it can detonate them.
The frag grenade is perfectly mid. It's usable, but the other grenades have caveats that make it inferior. Stick it in C tier. The cluster grenade is next.
Now these I f with. When you throw them, the grenade splits into 3 projectiles, and at rank 6, you can increase the shrapnel count by 2.
You can also get cluster grenades to do bonus damage to lifted targets. Overall, it's a nice grenade, but not that much better than frag, so we'll put it in C tier. Now we have a real goat, the sticky grenade.
The sticky grenade is incredibly versatile. You can throw it and it'll stick to the target and then reduce them to a red paste, or you can go on your Kevin McAllister arc and stick one to a wall and leave it as a trap for some poor fool who passes by.
The sticky grenade also takes on the properties of your active ammo power, letting you prime power combos.
The most insane tech with the sticky grenade is being able to throw it while you're in tactical cloak. You can walk right up to some enemies and basically place the grenade right on top of them, and then boom.
The sticky grenade is A tier. It's probably the best grenade.
Close, Joe, but I'd say the lift grenade gives it some competition. It does bonus damage to barriers, and will lift groups of enemies into the air if they're unprotected.
The lift grenade also detonates all 4 types of combos if the target only has regular health.
Lift grenade has to be the best in the game. Nothing better than throwing one out and seeing everything go up in smoke. A comfortable A tier. Next up are the biotic powers.
Charge and Nova, let's fucking go.
Donald's pronouns are charge and Nova.
Charge, 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 get Nova'd, get Nova'd, get Nova'd.
Okay, Donald, we get it.
Barack, don't you play with me? Put both Charge and Nova in S tier.
Charge and Nova are both central to the playstyle of a Vanguard, and this duo was exactly what was missing in Mass Effect 2. As long as you play properly, you can charge in. Nova, shoot your gun, and charge to your next target. The pair of abilities create what is probably the most exhilarating experience across the entire trilogy.
You're goddamn right.
At the same time, though, looking at the abilities individually, they aren't that great. Nova especially is just a damaging move that drains your shields unless you evolve it to prevent that.
Shut your goddamn mouth, Sleepy Joe, or I'll charge and Nova you.
If you charged and Nova'd me, you'd take me in about the next 3 city blocks out.
Joe, I know what you're saying. Normally, I don't rank powers based on their reliance on another one. But Charge and Nova are an exception. They were both clearly designed to be used in tandem. As such, They both go in S tier.
Yeah, baby.
Whatever, man, I don't get the appeal of just using the same two abilities over and over.
Yeah, because you couldn't handle it with your failing mental facilities.
Now we have Pull, which has a neat perk of throwing out 2 projectiles.
Now this is more my speed. You're a straight-up Jedi with double pull, and matched with double throw, you can set off repeated biotic combos.
Just a poor man's charge and Nova combo.
Double Pull and double throw is the safer version, but that doesn't mean it isn't also fun to play. Pull has some other uses as well, such as pulling the shields away from Cerberus Guardians and stunning other protected enemies. I'd give Pull a good A tier. It's a key ability for biotics.
Throw should go into B tier. Its main use is for detonating combos. The CC it offers isn't even that good.
Shockwave got improved. It comes out a lot faster now and travels in the air instead of along the ground. Shockwave can detonate combos, but it can also prime them with the lifting evolution.
Shockwave is a good power, but it gets overshadowed by Charge and Nova from the Vanguard.
It also gets outdone by pull and throw on Adept. It's a shame Shockwave has to share classes with 2 other abilities that combo off each other perfectly. There's barely a reason to waste your biotic cooldown on Shockwave.
Shockwave is going in C tier. It's improved since Mass Effect 2, but I find myself forgetting it's even there in front of the other biotic powers that Vanguard and Adept have. Singularity maintains a lot of the same traits it had in Mass Effect 2, including staggering and holding all foes in its vortex and doing damage over time.
With its rank 6 evolution, it can explode, dealing a bunch of damage to nearby enemies, or you can make it grow in size to give more enemies the good old suck.
Singularity is mostly the same with a couple added bonuses, but it pales in comparison to the other biotic powers like Shockwave does. C tier.
That just leaves us with Warp.
Warp is still the GOAT. Armor reduction, bonus damage against armor and barriers, increased weapon damage taken at rank 5, and it's a universal primer and detonator for combos.
The only downside to Warp is it does half damage against shields.
Still has a case for best power in the game, S tier.
It's so obvious that even Joe gets it.
Now we've got the tech powers. Combat Drone is up first, and this thing got a lot better.
Yeah, Combat Drone is great if you want the game to play itself.
Stop hating, Donald. The drone is actually sick in Mass Effect 3. You can give it chain lightning or a rocket to help out in the field.
At rank 4, the drone can self-destruct and set off power combos too. It's a big help. However, it seems that there's quite a few enemies that totally ignore the drone, which means its ability to draw fire is limited. Common foes like Husks, Adjutants, and Brutes will focus on Shepard and the squad.
Put the combat drone in A tier. Adding it gives you a 4th teammate to the field.
Agreed. Our next summon is the Sentry Turret, which will set up wherever you throw it.
Now the turret is pretty sweet. It can pick up a shock ability, 2 different ammo types, and a goddamn flamethrower.
The flamethrower and cryo ammo it receives can be used to prime explosive combos. However, just like the combat drone, the same groups of enemies will ignore it.
Doesn't matter, the sentry turret is clutch. You can toss it in your blind spot and it'll keep other enemies back or kill them outright.
Going to stick the sentry turret in A tier once again. It adds another unit to the field to give you a greater advantage.
My GOAT Cryoblast deserves to be higher now that it reduces armor, has the chilled effect, and sets off cryo explosions which can spread to nearby enemies and freezes them too.
I'll give Cryoblast some points. It combos well with Incinerate.
Cryoblast did level up, but not to an insane degree. B tier it is. Now speaking of Incinerate, that's next.
Make Chaos take the world.
Incinerate does good damage on armor as expected, but it's ineffective on shields and barriers.
It's still an essential power for setting off and priming combos. Incinerate goes in A tier.
At Overload again, and this ability has quite a few options.
Overload picks up the properties of Neural Shock at level 5, letting it incapacitate weak organic enemies.
And just like Disruptor ammo, Overload is effective on biotic barriers.
In fact, at rank 6, Overload is better at taking down barriers than Warp is.
Too bad it lost the overheating mechanic.
It didn't really need it. With the option to chain to 2 or 3 opponents, you can prime or set off multiple explosions with one ability. Overload is S tier, one of the best powers in the game.
Next up is Sabotage, which has 2 features. It'll hack synthetics like AI hacking used to do, and organics will be hit with an electrical discharge that causes them to spasm violently or fall over.
You can also turn hacked synthetics into berserks that move faster and hit harder.
The other option at level 6 is to make opponents more vulnerable to tech effects, causing them to take more damage from your combat drone. Sabotage isn't the flashiest tech power, but it combos well with everything else, easily a B tier. Tactical Cloak returns in 3, and it's still one of the best.
Now we're talking. Instead of using Tactical Cloak to run away like a coward, you can use it in 3 to be a real damn assassin. All of your damage is boosted, which makes it easy to walk right on up to someone and just fill the back of their head with a claymore shot.
You can't just use the claymore on every class, Donald.
Try and stop me.
The recharge time for Cloak is also proportional to the length of time you're using it, meaning you can cloak and end it early, and the longest you'll need to wait is 3 seconds. There is also an evolution that lets you use 1 power in Cloak without blowing your cover, allowing you to say throw a grenade, send out Incinerate, and then take a shot at someone else without being detected.
It goes without saying, but Tactical Cloak gotta go in S tier. It makes so many things in the game completely free to pull off. The last tech ability is Tech Armor.
It's still a great power, though it's got some changes. For one, it'll give you a 50% reduction to power recharge speed bonus. So if you want to use Tech Armor, you better make sure you're not packing anything heavy.
I'll still carry the Claymore.
Tech Armor differs from Mass Effect 2 in a much better way. It provides damage resistance instead of extra shields, and it no longer breaks when your shields are depleted, meaning you can have it on all you want. On top of that, the damage resistance also applies to your regular health.
Of course, you can still detonate Tech Armor to let out a pulse that knocks down weak opponents.
If there's any reason to give Tech Armor a high ranking, it's that it gives you a cool, unique melee where you swing double Omni Blades.
Rule of cool aside, Tech Armor is still an S tier. It's one of the reasons Sentinel is such a powerful class.
More bonus powers, we get Inferno Grenade and Marksman from Ashley.
What the hell does Marksman even do?
It boosts weapon accuracy and firing rate.
Hey, a boost in accuracy is just what you need, Joe.
Screw you, aiming isn't even that hard in Mass Effect 3.
In theory, Marksman is a useful power. Weapons with insane weapon spread like the M76 Revenant benefit from it. On top of the increased fire rate, you get really insane DPS, which makes something like the N7 Typhoon even better.
It's good if you don't want to worry about controlling guns with poor accuracy, but there's enough weapon mods in the game that help out with that as is. Plus, I'd rather use any other bonus power.
I honestly don't think I've ever used Marksman a day in my life.
Marksman is an A-tier power for what it does. It can make it so the only way you'll miss shots is by being out of cover or from gun recoil. Now about Inferno Grenade.
Naturally, it can be used to prime fire explosions, but it can't detonate any combos itself, unlike the other grenades. It also explodes on contact, so you don't have to worry about it bouncing along past your opponent.
Put Inferno Grenade in C tier. You can't throw it as far as the other grenades in the game, and it's barely improved at all from Mass Effect 2.
Garrus gives us a proximity mine and armor-piercing ammo here.
I never use it personally.
It's weaker than standard grenades, but has some great features like having an effective unlimited range and can be accurately placed anywhere by using weapons with a scope. On top of that, the vulnerability debuff it can apply is helpful in dealing with tankier enemies like brutes and banshees.
Anything that helps me remove banshees from my line of sight are welcome. Put it in B tier.
And now armor-piercing ammo.
As you'd expect, armor-piercing ammo is still pretty good, especially with all that armored opponents in the game. It can also pierce Guardian shields, though I just shoot them through the little window.
James Vega will give us Fortification and Carnage. Fortification actually has a use or two now. When the armor is purged, it'll increase melee damage for 20 seconds.
Oh, hell yeah, now we can get up close and personal.
Yeah, and then you get ganked by a Banshee.
Fortification can create a unique gameplay style. You can maintain the boosted melee damage indefinitely so long as you purge it every 20 seconds. And since the cooldown is quick enough, even with heavier weapons, you can run around punching the hell out of everything.
Honestly, sounds like it might be a cool melee-only challenge for Mass Effect 3.
Fortification has a niche use. As I'm sure most people don't go running hands in a game where you can shoot explosive ordnance and laser beams, but it's still a good power. Let's put it in B tier.
Carnage is back, and it packs a punch, being able to do over 700 damage depending on how you level it. You can use it with any gun now, and it can prime and detonate fire explosions.
Carnage isn't that great. It only does half damage to barriers and shields.
Half of a nuke is still a goddamn nuke, Sleepy Joe.
Carnage does bonus damage to armor and can knock enemies down at rank 5. It's a useful power, B tier. Now we have warp ammo, which we can get from Liara.
Warp ammo is good. It does extra damage to enemies who are floating due to biotics, and to enemies that are primed for biotic explosions.
Warp ammo can weaken armor or do more extra damage to regular red health.
Warp ammo is great for biotic classes and useful for taking out banshees, which is all I need A tier.
From EDI, we get decoy and defense matrix. Decoy is kind of shit.
Does it even do anything? I've used decoy before and it does nothing.
All melee creatures ignore the decoy. We're talking common enemies like husks and brutes. The decoy doesn't do its one job and distract things.
The damn thing doesn't even work if you spawn it where enemies can see. But on top of that, the decoy only really works if you spawn it close to enemies. The exploding evolution is ineffective because enemies with hit scan weapons will often miss it.
F tier without a doubt. The decoy doesn't work often enough.
Defense matrix is better, though that's hardly difficult.
Defense matrix is a useful panic button. You can activate it and purge it right away to get your shields back. This makes it one of the only ways besides energy drain to get your shields back. without waiting for them to recharge normally.
You also get damage reduction so long as you keep it active.
It's still just a dollar store energy drain. Put it in B tier.
Speaking of energy drain, we get that from Tally alongside Defense Drone.
Energy drain is obviously S tier.
Like we said before, if you don't know what to pick, just grab energy drain.
Energy drain is improved in Mass Effect 3 as well, being effective on biotic barriers now, and it still does normal damage to the armor of synthetic enemies. It also stuns most unshielded infantry opponents.
And how's the defense drone?
The defense drone plays defense for you. It's short range, but it'll shock any opponent that happens to get close. This is especially useful on annoying enemies that push on you constantly, like Cerberus Guardians.
The defense drone doesn't last until the end of combat like the combat one. It has a set duration of 45 seconds, which you can double to 90 at rank 4. It also has no ability to set up or detonate power combos.
D tier, it's a way worse version of the combat drone and brings nothing to the table.
Stasis, which we get from Liara, is pretty cool in Mass Effect 3. At rank 6, you can form a bubble that will trap enemies that walk into it.
Only 2 enemies at a time, though. Other enemies will just be staggered by it if they walk into it.
Stasis kind of mid, to be honest. It only works on unprotected enemies, doesn't work on Geth Primes, or on that rat Kai Lang. I feel like your biotic cooldown is best served for other things.
We'll put Stasis in C tier. Caden will give us Reeve and Barrier.
About time Caden did something useful.
Reeve, as expected, is still useful. It stops the health regen of cannibals and phantoms, but it isn't a permanent effect like it was in Mass Effect 2, only for the duration of the ability. Reeve also no longer restores health or stuns enemies. Instead, it grants a temporary damage reduction.
Seems like an overall downgrade.
Kind of. Reeve, at least, is one of the few abilities in the game that can set up and detonate biotic explosions.
It's a true fall from grace. Reeve in Mass Effect 3 is lucky to be B tier.
Barrier has good synergy with Vanguard. When you detonate your barrier, you can create a biotic combo by using Nova.
That is the main use of Barrier. When it breaks a blast, we'll lift nearby unprotected enemies into the air for a few seconds, setting them up for a combo.
As with before, the activation of Barrier is instant, so you can use it in emergencies to keep yourself alive.
Overall, a good power, and with the ability to set up combos, it's a bit better than it was in Mass Effect 2. We'll put Barrier in the A tier.
The Prothean will give us Dark Channel and Slam. The channel will start on one target and jump to another nearby one if you kill the first person soon enough.
I fuck with Dark Channel. It does bonus damage to armor and barriers. And because Dark Channel is a primer, you can just run through enemy after enemy by blowing them up when the channel jumps to them.
Dark Channel allows you to snowball any fight. It does only do half damage to shields, but it still goes crazy. We'll put Dark Channel in S tier, and now for Slam, it's not that great. It does nothing to enemies with armor or shields. It doesn't even briefly stun them.
It can detonate all power combos, though.
Slam's detonation might not even spread to other nearby enemies because it occurs at the top of the lift and not when the opponent slams into the ground.
Slam is kind of a worse shockwave in Mass Effect 3, not to mention the other better biotic abilities we have coming up next. Slam is going into D tier.
Dominate makes a return through the Leviathan DLC, right?
Dominate got some buffs that made it a shit ton better. Now it can work on enemies that have armor, shields, and barrier health.
Dominate, just like Sabotage, serves as a great distraction and can aid you in combat. You can dominate heavy Reaper forces like Brutes and Ravagers. Best case scenario, they help you massacre your enemies. Worst case, your dominated target will at least stop attacking you.
Depending on how you rank it, Dominate allows you to create a powerful ally in the middle of battle, or you can use it to weaken a powerful enemy.
The latter is more useful, inflicting lasting damage on a Ravager at rank 5, and then making it take more damage from all sources at rank 6 will let you cut them down.
I vibe with Dominate heavy. It's going into A tier. It's not a crucial power, but it's one of those you should pick up if you don't need energy drain. Now, our last two powers come from the Omega DLC. We have Lash and Flare.
Lash has to be about the coldest power in the series. You just grab a guy with your biotics and just snatch them in your direction.
It's no joke. When you hit an enemy at just the right angle, you can send an enemy flying. Depending on the map you're on, you might just toss them into the Shadow Realm.
There are a lot of extremely satisfying things in the Mass Effect trilogy, but absolutely nothing beats shitting on Kai Lang with a good lash and watching his punk ass crumble to the floor.
With the enjoyment Lash brings, on top of the fact that it can prime and detonate explosions, it's got to go in S tier.
Now that's a W take from you, Joe.
Good deal. Now, how do we feel about Flare?
Flare has a pretty long cooldown, especially for a biotic power, but that's because it's a goddamn nuke which can do damage to shields.
It has the radius and force of the grenades and can trigger biotic explosions.
Flare is good, but it's not the best despite its power and effectiveness on shields. How loud and massive it is kind of betrays its power, especially on higher difficulties. The main use of Flare is as an unlimited grenade that you can use to activate biotic combos, but there's hardly anything you're doing with Flare that can't be done with Warp on Adept, or with Energy Drain and Overload on other classes. It's still a satisfying power. With situational uses, I say it goes in B tier.
Tier list complete, looks good to me.
The cryo powers are still underrated.
They're staying where they are, Joe. Stay safe out there, drink plenty of water, get some sleep, and we'll see you on the next one.